Are you okay with transferring control of the schools back to the board that exists right now?
No, not necessarily. I think we need to go in a different direction.
Very good. All right, Ben Thompson of the Michigan Chronicles.
Mr. Mayor, we want to have you on the record here. We asked the same question to your opponent in a bid to seek accountability of local government here. There is a movement out there pushing council by districts to amend the city charter. Can Mayor Ken Cockrel Jr. tell us this afternoon if he supports the movement for council by districts?
Yes, I do.
Why?
I think it allows for more accountability, and I think it also creates a direct line of communication between council members and the people that they represent. And I've got experience with districts because, again, prior to being on city council, I was a county commissioner. So I represented a district. Being in a district, it forces you to really get to know the neighborhoods in your district, the specific issues in your districts, the business community in your districts. It really does force that. Now, I try to get to know the entire city as mayor, but it's harder when you represent a bigger geographic area, and I experienced that even on council. Having been on council for a while, I've got a pretty good working knowledge of the whole city, but that took some time. With districts, it's easier.
Do you support limiting the numbers of council members that we have from 9 to, let's say, 5, 7?
Yeah, I think that's something that ought to be looked at, because the reality is we are in a city that has lost population. So I think it's a valid question to say, well, since we've lost population and since government probably needs to shrink, that may need to include city council as well. Maybe you don't need 9 council members anymore.
Well, I'd like to remind folks you're listening to a mayoral town hall meeting with Ken Cockrel Jr. from Wayne State University. We're broadcasting this event live on 101.9 WDET, also on Fox 2 Detroit's website and at govaffairs.wayne.edu. And if you have questions, there will be time for audience questions a little bit later on in the broadcast. So fill out your cards, raise your hand, and Amanda here will come and pick them up from you. And we're going to continue on with the panel discussion right now. The next question is, it's up to Hewell Perkins from Fox 2. Hewell, you're up.
Thank you. This month, Forbes magazine listed Detroit as the most dangerous city in the country. Crime is routinely among the top concerns of citizens here. But given the budget restraints, what can you do as mayor to reduce the crime rate?
Mm-hmm. There's a number of things that we can do. Some of the things that we're already doing, some of which I alluded to, is number one is recognizing that we are under budget constraints. We have submitted an application to the federal government under the economic stimulus package for funding that we could use to hire an additional 100 to 300 officers to put on the streets. That's through the COPS program, which is a program that the federal government initiated actually under Bill Clinton, that provides local municipalities with money that they can use to hire additional officers. That's one thing. The other thing that we have also done is we've tried to be more strategic about how we deploy, and we're going to continue to do this. Mini stations, we've opened up 6 new mini stations in the city of Detroit for the purpose of bringing the police department and the community closer together. We've also rolled out the city of Detroit's first ever mobile mini station. And we're currently in the process of trying to develop a plan that we can use to reduce police response time. Part of how we're trying to look at this is by analyzing some of the things that have been done, for example, in New York and in other parts of the country where they really used analysis of crime data heavily in terms of making police deployment decisions. And that basically involves taking a look at what's happening, when it's happening, and where it's happening, and then you can begin to direct your police resources and your people based on what the data is showing you.
Are you in favor of offering incentives to shift population so that you aggregate citizens in areas where those services are easier, more accessible?
We may end up actually doing that. I have asked the director of the Planning and Development Department at the City of Detroit to convene a task force to look at creative downsizing, which is basically what you're talking about. And so that's being done as we speak. What we intend to do is not only solicit the input of local community groups and nonprofits who've taken a look at this issue, but also some people who, I guess for want of a better term, would be considered subject matter experts who've actually had involvement in doing this in other parts of the country. There's places like Youngstown, Ohio, and other areas where it's been done, and we're looking at some of those examples as well.
Rochelle Riley.
I I have a question about regionalism, but before I do that, let me ask a quick follow to the crime issue. And this came from students and faculty here at Wayne State. The city of Oakland, California is considering using private guards to patrol some areas of that city as a cost-cutting move. Is that something you would consider as the next elected mayor of Detroit?
No.
Why not?
It just sounds kind of bizarre to me. Private guard? I mean, are these...
Well, it is Oakland, California, but...
Yeah, I have some issues with that. You've got to have officers on the street doing this work. It's not... You can't have a city policed by rent-a-cops. I'm sorry.
Okay. Now,
we don't want Paul Blart out there making arrests in Southwest Detroit or the East Side. So
that was good, Mr. Mayor. Now, my question has to do with regionalism. Metropolitan areas around the country have found ways to merge county and city services to cut costs and increase population. But in addition, Detroit has the bigger issues of its failing economy in various ways across southeastern Michigan, and a real problem with racism. Mm-hmm. And you've got to combat both of those things to try and make some type of headway on helping Detroit be the center of a region. Can you talk a little bit about how you would do that in your administration as you continue?
Well, I think regional cooperation on some specific issues makes sense. The Cobo piece, for example. Another area where I think regional cooperation makes a lot of sense is mass transit. You know, we not only need light rail here in the city of Detroit, but I'm also of the belief that we don't need to have two bus systems. I've said that publicly before, and I stand by it. I think that SMART and DDOT need to ultimately be merged. I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense for Detroit and this region to be serviced by two bus systems, both of which arguably operate at various levels of inefficiency. So I think there's some areas where regional cooperation makes a lot of sense, and we ought to pursue that. And in the case of mass transit, we are in fact doing that. And the Cobo piece, even though it's on hold at the moment, I don't consider it to be dead. One other area as well is perhaps joint purchasing. And this is something actually that, and maybe you were even kind of referencing it in your statement, but what some cities and counties have done in other areas is that they do joint purchases of certain products and services for the sake of cost saving. And to give you an example, one example is in the wintertime, we all buy salt because we all have to salt the roads. So for example, the prospects of maybe doing a joint purchasing agreement where you can go for certain products, that makes some sense. It's something we've begun to take a look at. It can get kind of complicated because we've got our own purchasing ordinances and they have their purchasing ordinances, but it's something that I think is worth exploring.
How do you prevent regionalism from becoming a process in which racial animosities are again exposed, as we saw with Cobo?
Right.
It's very near the surface. Whenever there's a dispute, the racial hatred is ramped up.
Yeah, you can't. But see, one thing also is I think we need to acknowledge that elephant in the room. And let's be real about that. I mean, even though we're living in an era where we have an African American sitting in the White House, I think we'd be fooling ourselves if we said that racism doesn't exist. So that's real. We need to acknowledge that, and we need to deal with that. But I think we also have to recognize, though, that if this country had changed, and most importantly changed for the better, there probably wouldn't be an African American in the White House. So, and I think we need to keep that in mind too as we address a lot of these issues.
Michael A. Thompson, you're up next, sir.
Mr. Mayor, we have 3 casinos in Detroit as we speak. What role do you see these casinos playing in the future economic development of the city?
I'll be honest and say I don't see them doing much more than what they're already doing. I know periodically...
Should they be doing more?
Could they be doing more? Well, but see, here's the thing. The one thing that we have to remember about casinos is that they're a business just like any other business. And you go into business to make money. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, if somebody opens up a hardware store, you're opening up that hardware store so you can make money. I mean, you're selling tools, but the objective is to make money. Because if you don't, you go out of business. If you open up a dry cleaner, you're in that business to make money. Casinos are no different. So let's not fool ourselves in thinking that these things opened up so they could dump all their profits into the city of Detroit and help us with our financial problems. Yes, they are dumping a portion of those profits into the city. You know, we get a percentage every single day. As a matter of fact, there's actually a spreadsheet that actually prints out from all three of the casinos